The Galactic Council chamber was silent. Rows of alien diplomats, warlords, and strategists sat motionless, their bioluminescent eyes flickering in disbelief. The hologram before them played on an endless loop, a scene so implausible, so impossible, that even the most battle-hardened among them struggled to accept it. A planet burned. The colony had been erased. Human outposts, research stations and settlements, obliterated in an overwhelming display of power. The Var'xil Dominion, an empire spanning 1,000 systems, had ensured no human life remained. They had sent a message, yet something had gone terribly wrong. The suns of the Var'xil core worlds had begun to die. It was impossible. Their star systems, stable for millennia, were collapsing, burning out one by one in brilliant novas. Entire fleets, stationed near the heart of the Dominion, had gone silent, their last transmissions filled with incoherent static and frantic screams. The footage shifted to a grainy, intercepted broadcast, one the Var'xil military had dismissed at first. A human stood in the wreckage of a destroyed colony, their suit torn, blood streaking their face. The image was degraded, but the voice was clear, raw with fury. "You took everything. Now we take your light." The chamber erupted into chaos. The Var'xil warlord, supreme strategist Zol-Ra, slammed his clawed fist onto the table. How? How is this happening? A scientist, his scaled face pale with fear, whispered, "We do not know." The humans, they should not have the means, yet the reality was undeniable. One by one, the Dominion's suns were going dark. The Galactic Council had always considered humanity an anomaly, an upstart species, reckless, chaotic, and yet disturbingly resilient. When the Var'xil Dominion declared war on them, no one doubted the outcome. The Dominion's fleets outnumbered human defenses 1,000 to 1. Their technology was centuries ahead, their soldiers bred for war. The conflict had been short, brutal, and absolute. The human colony of Vesper 9, one of their largest settlements in the Outer Reach, had been the last to fall. A planetary bombardment had reduced it to dust. The Dominion had made an example of them, and the message was clear. Humanity would never rise again. That was 2 standard cycles ago. Now, something impossible was unfolding. Zol-Ra, the supreme strategist of the Dominion, stood before a holographic display of their core systems. 11 suns had gone dark. The fleets stationed in those systems had ceased all communication, their status unknown. Planets that once thrived under the Dominion's rule were lifeless. Trade routes were severed. Chaos spread like wildfire. The room was packed with high-ranking officials, Var'xil commanders, intelligence officers, and scientists. Fear was not an emotion their kind embraced, yet it hung thick in the air. "Explain this," Zol-Ra demanded, his deep voice sending vibrations through the chamber. An elder scientist stepped forward, his frilled crest twitching nervously. "We have examined the collapse of the stars. It does not appear to be a natural phenomenon." Zol-Ra narrowed his eyes. "Are you saying someone is doing this?" The scientist hesitated before replying. "There is evidence of interference, a force we do not understand." Murmurs spread through the chamber. A warlord scoffed, baring his fangs. "Ridiculous! No civilization possesses the power to extinguish." "Suns!" The holographic display flickered, and an intercepted transmission played once more, a human's voice, cold and venomous. "You took everything. Now we take your light." Zol-Ra's mandibles twitched. He had fought humans, crushed them, beneath his boots. They were resourceful, yes, but not this resourceful. How could the humans possibly retaliate? He growled, "We annihilated their colony. Their fleets are in ruin." The scientist turned pale. "We don't know." While the Dominion debated, one individual knew the answer. Beneath the ruins of Vesper 9, a lone human had crawled from the ashes. His name was Commander Elias Voss, and he had seen everything. The day the Dominion bombarded his world, he had been off-planet, leading a recon team in the asteroid belt. By the time they returned, the surface was a wasteland. He had landed anyway, against all logic, combing through the wreckage. He found no survivors, his wife, his daughter, his people, gone. And in that moment, something inside him broke, but something else was born. He did not weep, he did not curse, he planned. The Dominion thought they had wiped out humanity's presence in this outer reach. They were wrong. Voss activated an emergency distress beacon, not to call for help, but to send a message, not to Earth, not to the surviving human colonies, but to something else, something ancient, something humans were never meant to awaken. The Var'xil Dominion had expanded across the stars for millennia, consuming weaker civilizations, conquering worlds, and bending them to their rule. But there were ruins in the outer reach, forgotten, avoided, untouched even by the Dominion. The humans, desperate for survival, had studied them. They had found artifacts buried beneath the surface of long-dead worlds. The Dominion had ignored them, thinking them remnants of a bygone era. Voss had not ignored them. The day his world burned, he activated an ancient mechanism hidden beneath the ruins of Vesper 9. A signal pulsed outward, something neither human nor Var'xil could fully understand. It spread across the void, waking something that should have remained asleep. And now, the Var'xil's sons were dying. In the war chamber, Supreme Strategist Zolra clenched his fists. "What do we know about this human?" The intelligence officer hesitated. Elias Voss, former fleet commander of the Outer Reach Defense Forces, presumed dead after the destruction of Vesper 9. If he survived, Zolra's mandibles clicked. If he survived, then he is orchestrating this. But strategist, one of the warlords interjected, no species can kill a star. Silence followed. Then the hologram flickered again, and a final transmission appeared. New, fresh, Elias Voss stood against a backdrop of swirling red light, the dying sun of one of the Dominion's core worlds behind him. His voice was steady. "You thought we were defeated. You thought humanity was broken, but you never understood what we found in the ruins you ignored. You took our home. Now we take your empire." The transmission ended. For the first time in the Dominion's history, the warlords of the Var'xil felt fear. The Var'xil Dominion had never known fear. For centuries, they had dominated the galactic frontier, crushing lesser civilizations. With the overwhelming force of their armadas, their war doctrine was simple: strike fast, strike hard, and leave no survivors. No enemy had ever risen from the ashes of their conquest. Until now. Across the Dominion's core worlds, panic spread. Like wildfire, entire fleets had vanished. Trade convoys, military stations, and even war factories had gone dark without explanation. The suns, once the lifeblood of the Empire, were failing, as if something were devouring them from within. The Dominions. Leaders scrambled for answers, but none came. Every attempt to re-establish control only revealed a horrifying truth. This was not an accident. This was not a natural catastrophe. This was retaliation, and all of it pointed to one man, Elias Voss. Supreme Strategist Zolra stood in the center of the war chamber, surrounded by the highest-ranking commanders of the Dominion. The air was thick with unease. "This is unacceptable," growled Warlord Jiren, his massive armored frame towering over the others. "We wiped out their colony. We destroyed their fleets. How can a single human do this?" A holographic projection flickered to life, showing the Dominion's dying sons. The image pulsed with strange anomalies, disturbances in space-time, gravitational fluctuations that defied understanding. "This is not human technology," said the Dominion's lead scientist, his voice strained. "The energy signatures do not match anything known to our empire. We believe Voss has activated something ancient. Zolra's mandibles twitched in frustration. Ancient, the scientist hesitated before continuing. In the outer reach, beneath the ruins of Vesper 9, there were structures, remnants of a civilization lost to time. We dismissed them as unimportant. You dismissed them. Zolra's voice was venomous. And now, because of your failure, an entire empire is burning. Silence. Then a transmission alert flashed across the holographic interface. It was him. The council watched as Elias Voss appeared before them, standing in the wreckage of a Dominion warship, flames flickering behind him. His face was battered, his armor scorched, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "You wanted to exterminate us," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. "You thought humanity would scatter like dust in the void, but you never understood what you provoked." Zolra clenched his fists. "What have you done, human?" Voss tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. "I found something your empire buried, something your kind feared so much that you left it undisturbed." The screen flickered again, revealing the ruins beneath Vesper 9, colossal structures carved from obsidian-like stone, pulsating with an eerie, otherworldly glow. A massive mechanical construct lay dormant at their center, tendrils of raw energy slithering across its surface. "You called us weak," Voss continued, "but we learned, we adapted, and now we burn your empire the same way you burned our colony." The transmission cut out, the chamber erupted into chaos. Zolra wasted no time. "Deploy all remaining fleets, find him, destroy him." Across the Dominion, warships launched from their hangars. The might of an empire bore down upon a single man. But Voss was ready. The Dominion's first fleet, led by Admiral Kathir, entered the ruins of Vesper 9, expecting a simple extermination mission. Instead, they found a graveyard. Dozens of Dominion vessels, destroyed. The wreckage of their own ships drifted through space, burned beyond recognition. The few survivors left behind babbled in madness, whispering of shadows that moved in the void. Then the second fleet vanished. Then the third. Zolra received fragmented reports. Something was hunting them. It was not human. The Dominion's forces had tracked Elias Voss to the derelict remains of an ancient battlefield, the grave of the First War. Long ago, before the rise of the Dominion, an ancient race had fought a war so cataclysmic that its weapons had left permanent scars in space itself. The Dominion had never dared to explore these ruins, fearing the remnants of whatever had fought there. Now Voss had awakened it. The pursuing warships detected anomalies, faint, flickering distortions in the fabric of reality itself. Weapons fire passed through them as if they weren't there. Then, one by one, the Dominion ships began disappearing. Not destroyed. Erased. Dead. Zolra's command ship hovered near the edge of the battlefield when the final transmission from the lost fleet arrived. The message was garbled, filled with static and screams, but one phrase was clear, spoken in a language that should not exist anymore. The war never ended. Then silence. Zolra was no coward. He would not cower in fear like the weaklings in the War Council. If Elias Voss wanted a war, he would have one. With the last of his fleet, he descended upon Vesper 9. If Voss had truly awakened something, he would burn the entire planet to glass to stop it. As his forces landed, the ruins pulsed with an eerie glow. The air was thick with something unnatural. Then they saw it. Towering above the ruins stood a colossus of living metal, its form shifting and writhing like liquid darkness. Its eyes, if they could be called that, burned with the light of dying stars. It had no name. The ancients had never spoken it aloud, but Voss stood beside it and it obeyed him. "You wanted a war?" Voss called out. "Then fight the war you buried." The colossus moved, and the Dominion screamed, No one could describe what happened next. To those who survived, it was as if reality itself fractured, as if time twisted, space folded, and the laws of physics ceased to exist. The Dominion's fleet vanished. Their armies ceased to be. And Xol-Ra, he stood at the heart of the battlefield, his weapons useless, his soldiers turning to dust around him. Elias Voss walked toward him, his expression unreadable. "You thought we were weak because we didn't have your numbers, your ships, your empire." He gestured toward the ruined landscape. "But we had something you never did. We had desperation. And desperation." He looked up at the Colossus, now devouring the last remnants of the Dominion's fleet. "It makes you do things you shouldn't." Xol-Ra fell to his knees, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. The last thing he heard was the sound of his own son dying. As the Var'xil Dominion collapsed, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. A single human had brought down an empire. No one knew exactly what Voss had awakened or how he had done it, but one thing was clear. Humanity was not weak. And from that day forward, no empire, no warlord, no species would ever underestimate them again. Xol-Ra had led countless campaigns across the stars, crushed entire civilizations beneath the might of the Var'xil Dominion. He had never known fear until now. He stood alone on the smoldering ruins of Vesper 9, his fleet gone, his armies reduced to echoes. Above him, the Colossus loomed, an impossible shifting mass of living metal and void light, its form unstable, as if reality itself struggled to contain its existence, and at its feet stood Elias Voss. The human's face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something even the warlord could not understand. "You did this." Xol-Ra's voice was raw, his mandibles twitching in fury. "You unleashed this thing upon us." Voss took a slow step forward. His armor was battered, his body scarred, yet he stood tall. "No," he said, "you did." The ground trembled. The Colossus turned its shifting gaze upon Xol-Ra, and for the first time in his life, the warlord understood what it meant to be hunted. The Dominion had feared the ruins of Vesper 9 for millennia, but they had never known why. Buried beneath the surface was not just the wreckage of some forgotten war, nor was it merely a graveyard of a lost civilization. It was a battlefield frozen in time, a war that had never ended. The Colossus, this thing, was not a weapon. It was a survivor, a remnant of an ancient conflict between forces beyond the understanding of either human or Var'xil, and Voss had woken it up. "This was never about vengeance," Voss said, stepping closer to the defeated warlord. "Not entirely. You crushed our colony, our people, but you also left something behind. You left me." Xol-Ra's fists clenched. "You think this will make you victorious?" He gestured at the Colossus, at the dying skies above. "You think you control it?" Voss gave a small, bitter laugh. "No one controls it. I didn't unleash it. I showed it the war you started, and now it's finishing what it began, long before your Dominion ever existed." The stars above flickered, their light consumed. The last remnants of the Dominion's fleet had arrived in orbit, the final defenders of a dying empire. Hundreds of warships, their weapons primed, their commanders desperately awaiting orders. But there would be no battle. One by one, the ships winked out of existence, not destroyed, unmade. Something ancient had claimed this war as its own. Xol-Ra fell to his knees, staring at the sky, his body trembling. He had fought countless enemies, conquered countless worlds, but this was not something he could fight. He had believed in the strength of his empire, in the unshakable might of the Dominion. Now all that remained was silence. Elias Voss stood before him, expression unreadable. "You asked me what I did," Voss said quietly. "What I set loose." He glanced up at the sky, at the Colossus tearing through what remained of the Dominion's presence. "I gave it a name. Zolra's breath caught in his throat. Name? Voss nodded. It was waiting for eons, for something to finish what it started. It just needed someone to remind it that the war never ended. And the moment you attacked us, he gestured at the ruins, the devastation. It remembered. Zolra's mind reeled. The Dominion had burned humanity's colony to nothing, but in doing so, they had reignited something far worse. The warlord's voice was hoarse, his body weak. Do you even know what you've done, what you've unleashed? Voss exhaled slowly. Yeah. His voice was quiet. And I know you'd do it all over again if you had the chance. Zolra bared his fangs. You think you're a hero? Voss didn't answer. Instead, he took a step back, turned away, and raised a single hand toward the Colossus. For a moment, it stilled, shifting its form, as if waiting for something. Then it turned its gaze back to Zolra. And the warlord finally understood. This was not war. This was judgment. In the Dominion's core worlds, their people watched in horror as their suns flickered. They had once believed themselves untouchable. They had raised entire civilizations to the ground, believing no force could ever challenge their might. But now their skies were darkening. Across the galaxy, other species, once cowed beneath the Dominion's rule, witnessed its downfall. Some cheered, others watched in stunned silence, but none intervened, for they knew, deep in their bones, that this was not humanity's doing alone. This was something older, something that had been waiting, and humanity had simply reminded it of what had been stolen. The war was over. Voss stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching as the last remnants of the Var'xil Dominion were consumed by the void. He had won, but as he looked upon the devastation, he knew something fundamental had changed. The Dominion had feared humanity's resilience, their ingenuity, their ability to adapt and survive. But now the galaxy would fear something else. Because Elias Voss had not just avenged his people, he had redefined war itself, and the galaxy would never be the same. The war was over. The Var'xil Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, was gone, not defeated, not conquered, erased. Elias Voss stood amidst the ruins of Vesper 9, watching the sky. The stars had not returned. The Colossus was gone, vanishing into the void, leaving only silence in its wake. The battlefield, once filled with fire and death, was now eerily still. There was no celebration, no victory cries, only emptiness. Voss exhaled slowly. He had spent so long chasing vengeance, pushing himself beyond the limits of survival, that now, with the war finally over, he wasn't sure what was left. His people were gone. His home was dust, and yet, against all odds, he remained. Across the stars, news of the Dominion's fall spread like wildfire. The species that had once bowed in fear now whispered in awe and horror. The humans had been considered weak. They had been written off as a minor nuisance in the grand theater of galactic war. But now the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They had survived genocide, adapted in ways no species had predicted, and in the end, they had turned an empire's greatest mistake into its undoing. And Elias Voss, one man, a single survivor, had become a legend. Some called him a hero, others called him a monster, but no one, not even the strongest empires, dared to challenge humanity now, because if one human had done this, what would happen if humanity as a whole decided to go to war? A single transmission echoed across the galactic network. It was brief, and it came from an untraceable source. We are not conquerors. We are not gods. We are survivors, and we never forget. It was not a threat. Not exactly. But the message was clear. Humanity would never allow itself to be trampled. Again, Voss took one last look at the ruins of his fallen colony. He had no reason to stay. Vesper 9 was dead, but humanity wasn't. There were still colonies. There were still fleets, and there were still people who needed protecting. He activated his beacon, calling for extraction. As he waited, he glanced up at the darkened sky and whispered, "Rest now, the war is over." But deep down, he knew the truth. The war was never truly over. Not for him, not for humanity, and somewhere, out in the endless void, something was still watching.